I am really excited to welcome Jackie Sheldon to the Women in Rugby League Life in the Lionesses series. An inspirational but also a legend and a pioneer of the women's rugby league for a long time in the 1980s, 1990s and early 2000s. Born in Featherstone originally, but also played a big part not only in community rugby league, helping set up rugby league in the local community of Wakefield, Redhill, and eventually taking on the development officer role, but also assistant coach for the 1996 tour and also head coach for the 1998, 2000, 2002 and 2003, and it exhausts me everything that you've ever done, Jackie, but I'd like to welcome you and thank you very much for taking this time to just tell your story in rugby league.
Thanks, Julia.
I mean, I'm really interested about how you first got involved with it and your initial steps into rugby league and how you got involved.
Well, it was around about 1989-90, and I was working for a programme called Action Sport with Wakefield Council, and part of my role was to get people within the district, or offer opportunities for people within the district who are not represented in sport, to come and try sport and get involved in whatever way they want. And one of the target groups was women and girls. And at the time, as part of the Wakefield programme, there was a rugby league development officer called Martin Ward working with the council sports development unit, and so we did a joint project, Action Sport and the Rugby League programme, and we offered 3 taster sessions for women throughout the Wakefield district to come and try women's rugby league. So we ran the taster sessions, and from those sessions, 2 women's teams formed. One was Redhill Women and the other one was Wakefield Panthers, and I became a player with the Wakefield Panthers rugby league team. You know, my background, I'm from Featherstone, you know, grew up in a rugby league town, never had opportunities to play it, and here I was with an opportunity to have a go. So Martin threw me a pair of rugby boots and said, right, come on, we'll form, you know, the Panthers. And so I was a founder member and a player with that team for over 7 years. And that was my first introduction to playing.
And actually, Wakefield, well, both Wakefield and Redhill were phenomenal, weren't they, in the women's game then in Wala? I mean, the amount of times, you know, particularly Wakefield, which actually I think they were unbeaten in something like, I think they were only beaten once in 8 years
Yes.
at one point. And Redhill, there was always a competition and a rivalry, wasn't there, when they played in the league?
Yeah, I mean, when we formed the team, it was the winter. It was January, February of I think it was 89 or 90, and it was we organised a few taster sessions, and we of that year, in September of that year, joined the Women's Rugby League Association. I think there was only one league, there was one division at that time. So we joined in September. So between January and February, we were forming the team. We had a couple of taster sessions, got beaten, and then we joined. And then we took this training seriously during the summer of that year. Joined the Women's Rugby League Association and became National Cup winners in the first year. And we retained that title for many years. I think it might have been 8 years, if not more, and was only beaten once by Redhill, actually, in that period at the time. Obviously it went on after I finished in that time, but yeah, it was highly successful. We both teams joined, very competitive league when it was started, and that was my introduction into joining a women's team.
Wow. And so how did you get involved then in the 1996 tour, and how did you sort of, your pathway to being able to get involved with that?
Well, part of my role, because I moved on from Wakefield Council, I went to work for Calderdale Council, and my role was Women and Girls Rugby League. So I was involved, not Rugby League, Women and Girls Sports Development. So I was kind of proactive in encouraging more women and girls in sport. So during that time between my starting to play, I gained my rugby league qualifications. So I did my level 2 rugby league award. My level 3, became the only woman to do the rugby league level 4 at that time, which is a top, the RFL's top coaching award. So I became actively involved in coaching. I also, with another colleague, Anne Thompson, we got involved in the Women's Rugby League Association, which was a national league, and I became secretary of the Women's National Rugby League Association, and Anne became chair. And we were looking at reforming or further developing opportunities, competitive opportunities nationally. So, you know, we developed the league into more than one division. It evolved. So during a period of 3 or 4 years, I was, you know, actively involved in the Women's Rugby League Association, and actually as a coach. I went on to, and then as part of my role with WALA, the Women's Rugby League Association, I think it was 1995, we got an invitation from the Australians to compete against Australia. And so the committee, the Women's Rugby League Association, formed a Great Britain Rugby League committee, and I was on there, Anne Thompson was on there, and Louis Gardner, who was working with in Doncaster. And we formed the Rugby League Great Britain committee. We appointed a coach, which was Ian Harris at the time, team manager, and we recruited the players throughout 1995-96, raised in the amount of about £80,000, because it wasn't funded at the time. Went over in 96, I think it was the summer of 96, and beat the Australians 2-1 in the first ever Women's Rugby League Test series. You know, it was because it was a very tremendous thing to do. And on the back of that, I contacted Sport England, and, you know, we had a meeting with Sport England and said, look, we've beaten Australia, we've raised this money, and then we got a grant to establish a new post for Women's Rugby League with the RFL to further develop opportunities, and I moved into that post. So that was the first international.
I know, and just when you're thinking, because you played no small part in that, because obviously you were an assistant coach, went out there and very instrumental in, and when I look at all the stuff, because what I've failed to mention is we've got this, we're going to have, Jackie has kept everything about all her history within the sport, which is absolutely fantastic, because there is nothing documented about Women's Rugby League at Heritage Key. So what you've kept is going to be fantastic. So we're going to have a whole Jackie Sheldon collection here of all the information. And I've been looking through the information, and what you did in order, not just that first year, but actually throughout all the years, which we'll come on to a bit later, was how you selected players and got them to do all the fitness training and things like that. Talk a bit more about that, about, you know, it was the first time ever, and what you did in order to actually get them before they even got on the plane to Australia.
Yeah, I mean, in 96, I say, like, we formed a team. I mean, there was a lot of, bearing in mind there was nothing before. I think England or Great Britain had gone out to France, but it was prior to that. But this was, you know, the formal first Test series. So we had to develop processes. We had to develop a process to appoint a coach, to the coaching team, and I was assistant coach to the team, as was Anne Thompson. We then had to look at, and Ian was instrumental in doing this, is looking at the selection of the right players to go out in 96. So there's a whole selection process, working with the league and the teams to actually get trials, to formally select the team. And then on the other side of it was then organising the tour itself, so that the manager, the funding, so players raised money, we did team fundraising events, we put a grant in. I think we got over £30,000 for a grant towards the first tour. And so it's the Sports and Arts Foundation, I think we got the grant from. So there's a whole amount of work that was done prior to us going out in 96. And bearing in mind that none of this had been, we're developing new processes, we were So the whole amount of work, and we were volunteers. Everybody was volunteers at the time. So it was a real effort to get us out there. And obviously it was successful, because we won the Test series 2-1, unbelievable. We came out of that, and it was also a catalyst to develop the women's game as well, in terms of the internationals, giving an incentive for players, top players in teams, to be able to move on to something in the future. So after that, I then was appointed as head coach for the 1998 tour against New Zealand. We got an invite to go out there, an unknown quantity. In New Zealand, we and a tremendous team. The Kiwi Ferns were a formidable team. We went out. So from 96, I became head coach, and then we started to further develop the processes. So working with Wala and the teams, looking at the selection process, looking at fitness, looking at developing coaches to work with the team, raising the profile, and again raising money. Each of the 5 internationals that we ran, it was all funded. We had to raise the money for that. So again, that was a massive effort. And 96, we went out. We were beaten, but it's a big learning curve. We learnt some tremendous lessons, and it was on the basis of that tour that we then learnt what the key things we needed to do to develop. One was fitness, one was defensive, and the other was increasing the intensity of the women's competition in this country. So we put in a lot of things in place regarding improving fitness, having individual fitness programs, fitness testing, looking at the tactical and technical skills of the players, in particular defence, and looking at a whole new selection process. And in 2000, we ran the first women's international competition in England as part of the Men's World Cup. And we went into that competition and we came up runners-up. There was Australia, New Zealand, and Australia. We came runners-up. Really, what the advancement that I you really saw was, we came within 10 points of New Zealand, which was a massive points reduction from the 98 tour, and quoted, I think it was in the Independent, by a quote from the New Zealand captain, that we were the most physical dominating team in the competition. So they were the real markers that we were making a big difference. And then we went on to 2002. We went back out to Australia. The first opening game, we beat Australia by the most point difference ever, and it was again another marker. And then 2003, we went out into the World Cup, Women's World Cup. I think it was 9 or 10 teams in that competition. So each time we were learning, we were developing, we were, and on the back of that as well, we were bringing new players in, developing youth players. So we developed an under-21s team, and some of those players went into later competitions, I noticed. So we were trying to develop an infrastructure and also the profile of women's rugby league at the time. So we were getting lots of national coverage, TV coverage, radio coverage at that time. So it was a catalyst really to develop the whole game. The women's league teams were developing, the divisions were developing, the players themselves were developing, and so it was a whole process of development. It wasn't just about an international competition; it was a catalyst to evolve the women's game, the teams, and raising resources to do that. As I said earlier, we, on the back of the Australian tour, we managed to get a Sport England grant for the first National Women's Rugby League development officer, and I was seconded from Doncaster Council at the time into that post with the Rugby League. It was the first national post, and it became established. So I was had lots of roles. I was working as the first national development officer. I was on the Wala committee, and I was also coaching the Great Britain team as well. And those were volunteer posts separate from the role I had with the RFL. So lots of things were going on at that time.
I always remember the different hats you had because, and I don't know if people really know that the women's game wasn't part of any particular governing body. They were associate members. So there was WAL, a Women's Amateur Rugby League Association, and the Great Britain squad came part and parcel of those. So all the time you were treading new ground, weren't you? And it was so not lucky, actually. It was perfect that you had a really great knowledge of development, because I always remember the day at Shelf when we had all the women's teams there and we were post-it noting all over of how we wanted, and you led that. You got someone in specially, I think it was Sue Slocum specially, to come in to be able to, from hockey, to help us develop the women's game at that time so that we could grow it, and all those plans. So nothing was by accident, and you are so strategic and forward thinking. You were well ahead of your time at you know.
There was two things that went on. The forum at Shelf was when I was part of the WALA committee, and what we wanted to do, we wanted to consult with the women's teams and how they wanted to move the women's game forward. It was actually Celia Brackenridge that facilitated that one. And we brought her, she was an external facilitator, well known in sport, women's sport, and we brought her in as an independent to kind of bring the women's teams, and there was quite a lot of attendance there at the time, representing, I think it was over 60 people attended from the women's game, and they actually identified how they wanted to move the women's game forward, and then on the back of that we wrote the development plan that took the game forward from the development point of view. Sue got involved, Sue Slocum got involved from the Great Britain team. She was working with the England hockey in the Olympics, and she was a female coach, obviously working at a high level, and I brought her in to kind of as a mentoring role and working with us to look externally, not just only internally, but what are other international sports doing, how were the lessons. And the thing is, it was also building the team off the pitch, not just on the pitch. So you had players that were coming together that on a Sunday played against each other. They weren't a team. So a big part of the work that I was doing with the team was to get them to work as a team, so to get to know each other. So we did a lot of off-pitch stuff as well as on-pitch, developing codes of conduct and behaviour, looking at how involving them, getting them to understand the technical and tactical game and making decisions, because when you're on the pitch, your coach isn't there, they're there, they need to understand about they need to make the decisions, they understand about why they make decisions. So there was a lot of work in terms of the technical work, but also team building, the mental toughness side of it all, the fitness testing, the physical side of it all. So it was looking at the holistic development of the team, and a lot of work went into that, and it evolved as we moved on from tour to tour. So yeah, I mean, a lot of work went in, and obviously what I did is I saved all the records. So I kept my coaching notes, I kept the records of players, the teams, I kept programs, I kept photographs, videos, and just stored them away. Because again, like we would say, we sat outside of the Rugby League at the time and Bala. And so I stored them away, and they've been there for 20 odd years until now. Somebody says, oh, does somebody know what happened during this period? And I said, yeah, I've got it all. It's all written and documented, and therefore, you know, what I wanted to do is make sure it was in a safe place, because it's something. It's a true record of what happened, the players that were involved, all the work that went on, and I did save everything as much as I could. And so that's been donated as a record of each of those internationals. And also, you know, physical things like shirts and trophies and kit. You know, that in itself is a story of how the kit evolved. You know, we had no money; we were dependent on getting the cheap players' kits, and some of the sizes of those shirts. I think Brenda's a testimony to that in terms of the size of the shirts we were putting players in, because we weren't very sophisticated at that time. We were just, we need some kit, let's get it. And then how that kit evolved throughout the tour, how it became lighter, more tailored to the players, etc. So lots of work, and hopefully those records will be a useful tool going forward to show the kind of things that we were doing at the time.
Absolutely. And as you know, when I met you a few years ago and found out you had the loft, it was thank goodness you did, because actually you are the only one that I can find anywhere that's got a true record. People have got little bits, but to have all that in one place is so exciting, because we can then tell the story, because the women, they've not been recognised. You women have not been recognised for the role that you played. The last team to beat an Australian team in 1996, last international team in a three set series. But also, these women have never been capped. You've never been recognised for what you've done, and that's so important. And the Rugby League is really keen to be able to recognise that and give these women really, the recognition that they actually deserve. So thank goodness you did, because it also gives us that it is a true record, because it's from someone who was actually there and actually leading it. And your leading behind it is phenomenal, because not only did you understand the development of sport and how you develop sport, but also you grew as a person. So you're the first Rugby League development officer, woman Rugby League development officer. Also in your coaching, you grew as a coach, didn't you, as you moved through? And at that time, I always remember the 1998 tour, which, as you say, was a big learning curve of what you didn't just put your cue in the rack. It was right, what we're going to do differently and what we're going to do with the sport to do differently.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a coach, the 98 tour, even though we got beaten, tremendous, I think it was average 30 points difference. It was a massive learning curve, and I knew at the time I wasn't, ready probably for that role, but I was fortunate in that I had opportunities to develop over a period of time in that role, and so I went out to work from the best. So I looked at who were the best coaches, I was involved in the high performance coaching program, that we got involved in with Sports Coach UK, working with the 5 dominated sports. I was also part of the women's, it wasn't women's high performance, it was the Rugby League high performance coaching program run by David Waite at the time. So I went out to say, right, these are the things I need to learn. And over a period of time, I obviously had opportunity to learn. And I think in 2003, I'd been involved in 10 years. I thought, right, I finally know what I know now. And then I resigned. As a coach, it gave me an opportunity to develop as a female coach and work at that level. And we did push the boundaries. I was, open to looking at, well, what do we need to learn? Where do I need to get this information from? Bringing people in, and my one of my phrases were, "Would you work with us?" And I've got no money. And people did come to work with us. We had Simon Worstop. He came in and did the strength and conditioning. He was working at Sheffield and originally. Sheffield Eagles was part of the team when they beat Wigan in the Challenge Cup final. I can't remember the year. Was it 98? I think it was. So people came on board and supported us, and that was part of it. It wasn't. We were saying who can we learn from, who can we bring in, and the other great thing about it was seeing the players develop. These players, we would start a 2-year program for each international. We'd recruit 2 years out, and I developed a bigger squad from 98 onwards because we needed to increase the intensity of competition. So we got a bigger squad, trained them all together, and played them against each other. So it was more equal competition. And right from the outset, we would say, you are involved in this, you've been invited into this team, and you may be working for at least 18 months before we select the final team, 6 months out before we go. It's volunteer effort. You will be asked to do X, Y, Z, train, raise money, be available for PR. and you still might not be selected. And the commitment that those women showed was tremendous. You know, I mean, they were, and it was a very difficult decision to when the selection came, because she saw people giving so much. In addition to them having full-time jobs, some were had families, and so it was a tremendous effort from those players, and those that you know, when I can remember Jane Banks, for instance, getting involved in '96, the player she became in 2000 and beyond, and other players. It was it was really it was really satisfying to see it. You know, it was about development of the sport, but development of players, development of me as a coach. And so there's all that kind of stuff that some of the records will show. It shows scores, test scores, it shows try scores, it shows that all that kind of stuff is a quantitative measure. But as people, they evolved as we went along, and that was really, really satisfying to see.
And these interviews are actually, that's coming out of it, of how their, you know, their international representation, and then how that developed them as people to what they then went on to, which they never would have thought of if they hadn't, you know, been in the internationals. And not just that, Jackie. I mean, not only were you the first level 4 grade coach and had a phenomenal coaching career, although it's short. You know, a phenomenal coaching career where you personally came on, but brought on a lot of other people. You had all the off-field stuff, so you were doing the PR and marketing and helping with the fundraising, all that sort of thing, and event management. When the Rugby League World Cup when the series was here, you were behind the scenes doing all of that.
I was. We had a great. For each tour, we had some really good managers as well. So we acted as a team. And I think the great thing about that, as head coach, I was able to say to the team, this is what I want for the team. And the managers worked with that as well. So, and then I had my day job, which is the Rugby League development work. And the year 2000, we were able to get the matches sponsored by the local authorities, 6 local authorities. And we developed a development programme working with local teams, the local authority around each team. And I was able to kind of work on different levels. So in terms of the preparation for the games, the manager, I was able to influence management side of it all, but I was able to influence the development side of it all as well. And it was you know, multifaceted in terms of, it's not just a head coach. It was quite a lot of work, and the PR was really important. Profiling players, profiling the team, because it raised the profile of what we were doing. So we were on Sky Sports for features. We were on Cilla Black's Moment of Truth. I got a call for that, to raise money for our team suits, £5,000, and that in itself is a whole story. The players themselves got exposed to media, so they were developing other skills in terms of presenting themselves and also the team in front of the media. We had a double page in the Sun. Invited the reporters to one of our training camps at an army camp at the time. And the other thing, really important thing, we had a lot of enjoyment along the way. You know, it was great to be the players, a lot of camaraderie. There was a lot of you know, we had lots of learning curves and thought, oops, hang on a minute, we need to do that differently next time. So it was hard work. There was a lot of things going on, but it was enjoyable as well. That's what I would say.
And and you sort of developed the sport, as you say, from there. So you got grants with those local authorities in 2000, which, because you weren't just about developing yourself and those players, it was bigger than that for you, wasn't it? And other women coaches. So it wasn't just you on the high performing women coaches. There was a lot of other women involved in that as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, there was 2 programs going. There was one that was the Women in High Performance Coaching Program, which was run by Sports Coach UK. I think it's supported by Sport England, and we had to select 5 female coaches to get involved in that program, and it involved women's rugby union, football, cricket, and Rugby League, selecting 5 of their female coaches, bringing them together and looking at aspects of high performance, coaching and providing training. So I can remember Clive Woodward came in and did a session with the coaches. David Waite came and did a session as well, and looking at the common features of women working at high performance level. So we selected 5. Well, I was one of those coaches, and there was 4 others. I think there's Brenda, Lisa, Chantel, and Sam, who they became as part of the program, and you know, they really developed. Lisa and Sam went on to coach the under-21s and actually took the team to France and I think Russia as well. So it was a pathway for female coaches. So that was that program, and it was great to look across other sports that were developing female coaches. The other program that we got involved in was David Waite was doing a similar program in Rugby League, and Lisa and myself was on that high performance coaching program alongside the professional coaches in Rugby League, which were male at the time. And I went on, and I think Lisa went on to coach on the regional boys performance camp. So I was head coach to the Yorkshire under-13s boys team, representative team, and was assistant coach to the under-15s 1 year. I can't remember which year that was. So we were kind of putting women in as leaders in terms of coaches, as well as the player development pathway as well. And that was tremendous, because, you know, we got lots and lots of positive feedback on our coaching, and the level of which our coaches were working, particularly in the Women in High Performance Coaching Programme. You know, we were kind of leading out there.
I always remember as a sport being very much that you were leading, and you won an award. You won an award, and I think
sorry about that.
That's all right. So you won an award, but also I think the team, one of the teams was put up for award, wasn't it? A national award.
Yeah. I after '98, I was awarded. I was nominated for an award for the Women in Sport. It was the Sunday Times Women in Sport Award for Administrator of the Year, which I went on to win. It was sponsored by Mowat Shandon in 1998 for the 1988 tour that would run. So I went on to win that. To give a bit back, Denise Lewis at the time, she won the Athlete Award. I won the Coach Award, and I think the team did go on to be nominated for an award, but at the time, I can't remember that. But in terms of which award it was at the time we were getting the managers involved in that process. But I think it was around about 2002. And I know some of the players went down to meet Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister at the time, and they went to London. I wasn't able to do it at that time. I was busy elsewhere. But yeah, no, they were getting nominated and recognised, and you know, the press wasn't recognising quite a lot of. Like I said, we were getting pieces in The Guardian, The Independent, not Guardian, so The Independent, yeah, certainly. Part of the Men's World Cup in 2000, The Independent ran a feature in one of the magazines of the top 5 games of the World Cup. That was the men and women. And I think the women came out as the Australia Great Britain team semi-final came out as the 4th best game of the whole competition. That was the men and women, which was absolutely superb. So you know, it wasn't just nominal. It was kind of, you know, we were getting some genuine credit for the work and the level at which those women were performing.
So when you look back, what were the, you know, what do you think the main challenges were?
resourcing obviously was a main challenge. Number one, resourcing. You know, we were self-funded. We were outside of the governing body at the time, and resourcing was a big aspect of that. The fact that we had no previous structures in place for the internationals, so we were developing our own structures, our own coaching program, our own selection processes, our own training program as we went along. There was no template, there was nothing done before, so it was evolving as we went along. Resources in terms of money and people, expertise, and I think I'd say recognition in terms of the women sitting outside of the structure and not having a funded international programme. Having said that, the profile that we worked and the recognition came in terms of not being a fully integrated programme within the international, but in terms of the work that we were doing, the level of playing, you know, I mean, these were athletes that, you know, if you look at some of the stats from the games, they were, you know, training really hard on individual programs. They were developing into real athletes, and that was a recognition, but we were outside. So I think that the three things I would say was the resourcing, the no infrastructure, and the being sitting outside of the actual governing body at the time.
Yeah, so what about the positives then? When you look back, I mean, it does seem ages ago, doesn't it? All your achievements and things. When you look back, what do you think about it all?
What do I think about it all? I think that it was a very unique experience. I think, you know, it was a privilege to be involved in. That was hard work, and I look back, I think, was that really real? Where did I fit the time in to do all this? But it was a real privilege to have that opportunity. I think that's one thing. The highlights, obviously, the '96 tour was a real highlight, and coming back, that was just like unbelievable. Another highlight for me was the World Series running this country, and the difference between over that 4 years in '96 and 2000, the strides that we made, that was a real highlight. Thinking, yeah, we're on the right lines. The 2002 tour was the first game when we went out. I think we were beaten by 10 points difference to the Australians. We didn't win the Test series for various reasons, but that game kind of sticks out for me. The camaraderie and the friendships that we developed throughout that whole period, and you know, lifetime friendships, and the players, you know, that might come out with some of the interviews that you had, you know, and the memories again that we've had, you know, how many people can say been part of these international competitions and seen the things we've seen and done the things we've done, even though it was kind of hard work at the time. So they're the kind of things, and I'm saying fun, but the enjoyment we had doing it as well. And then we can share these individual experiences. Can you remember when you know, we had see-through shorts at the 2002, and we had to go get, you know, it's all those kind of experiences that you can't, you know, you have, that you can share with the players. It's hard to kind of articulate outside of that arena, if you like. But yeah, no, it was a real privilege to be involved.
And you know, the fact that the players are, and that is a big thing around the comradeship, the friendship, the fun, the hard work. But actually those, as you say, lifelong friendships that were sort of developed from that. What would you say to the sort of next generation? You know, obviously Rugby League now women's Rugby League's on television and they're getting the recognition and things. What's your thoughts to the next generation, this generation, and actually the next generation of Rugby League people?
I think if you want to progress in any sport, women's Rugby League is no different. You've got to have a passion for it, and you've got to prepare to work hard. It doesn't come easy, you know. You know, when you work you play at the top level, whatever year or generation you're working in, you've got to put the hard work in. And if you want to work at that level, that's what it brings. But it's a tremendous opportunity as well, and you've got to have a passion for it. You know, and it's a great experience. It's a great honour to play at the top level. But for those involved in women's rugby league themselves, you know, when I got involved, I just loved it. It wasn't a job for me. It was hard work, but it wasn't, oh, I've got to get up and go to work. It was absolutely, bring it on. This is what, you know, I really enjoyed it. And I think you've got to have that passion and enjoyment for the sport to be able to really get out of it what you want. So, you know, but like I say, at the top level, it is hard work. But, you know, if you love it, it isn't hard work, really. It's what you want to do, isn't it?
Jackie, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I mean, it's just a snapshot in this very short time about your journey within rugby league. Women's rugby league and rugby league is better for you being part and parcel of it. And the women's game, and women and girls game in particular, all those hard years and work from right down to grassroots, right up to the Women's International, because of your involvement, is definitely richer. And you're just such a pioneer for so many women from the past, but also the next generation. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Julia.